Associate Professor in Mental Health Nursing. Human body consists of various organ systems. Each organ system is having its own function, and the different organs integrate together to function the whole body in an effective way. One of the important functions is the higher mental functions of the brain and also regulation of the emotions, which is the important function of the nervous system. So today I'm going to talk about the anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. Mainly I'm going to review the structure and the function of the brain, the limbic system, the neurotransmission and the neurons. Right. So before going to the topic, let me define or tell you the meaning of the term psychobiology. Psychobiology is the study of foundation of cognition, emotional and behavioral processes. If you take the nervous system, we can classify the nervous system into two, which is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system has got the parts such as the brain, neurons, and or we can say the nerve tissues and the spinal cord. The brain is again divided into the structures like the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. The nerve tissue is consisting of the neurons, the neurotransmitters, and the synapse. And the spinal cord includes the various nerve fibers, that is the fiber tract and the spinal nerves. So these are the structures that are present in the central nervous system. Moving on to the second part, which is the peripheral nervous system, it includes the efferent system and the afferent system. The afferent system is mainly related to the sensory neurons, which are having the somatic as well as the visceral functions. If you take the efferent neurons, it has got the function of both the autonomic nervous system and the somatic system. The autonomic nervous system, again, if you take, it is having the classification of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is the brief classification of the structure of the brain. So we'll learn in detail about the brain, the neurons, the synapse, and the abnormal neurotransmission. Right. The first thing is the brain. So when you take the brain, I told you it is got the three parts, that is the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is composed of the two parts, which is the cerebrum and the diencephalon. So the cerebrum has got the four lobes, which is the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. If you take the diencephalon, it has got the parts like the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the limbic system. So that is about the parts of the forebrain. Coming to the midbrain, it is otherwise called as the mesencephalon. If you take the hindbrain, it has got the parts like the pons, medulla, and the cerebellum. So this is the overall structure of the brain. You can see here in the image, right? So we have got the various lobes, right? So we have got the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. We have got the diencephalon, which includes the parts of the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the limbic system. Then you can see in the middle, which is the midbrain, otherwise called as mesencephalon, and the last part, which is there at the lower or the base of the brain, is the hindbrain, which is composed of the pons, medulla, and the cerebellum. Right? So this is the image of the structure of the brain. So we will learn about each of the parts in detail. First, let us learn about the cerebrum. Cerebrum has got two hemispheres, right? We have got the cerebrum, which is the important or the largest part of the brain, which has got two hemispheres, that is the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Both these hemispheres are connected, or we can say they are attached by a part called as corpus callosum. The outer part or the outer shell of the brain is the cortex. If you take the function of the hemisphere, the left hemisphere, it is mainly concerned with the comprehension, the rationality, the controlling of the speech, and the logic of a person. Left hemisphere is the most dominant part of the brain in most of the people, right? Moving on to the right hemisphere, it is the non-dominant part in most of the people, and it is otherwise called as the creative brain, which is concerned with the functions such as affect, behavior, and spatial perception of the areas. So this is the function of the left and the right hemispheres. Each of the hemispheres is being divided into various lobes. So we have got the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. So you can see here in the image where the various lobes which is present in each of the hemispheres, right? So we will learn about each of the lobes in detail. The first one is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the one which is controlling the various functions of the body movements, which is related to even thinking, speaking, right? Then we have got even the judgment formation. So that is the function of the first part or the first lobe, which is the frontal lobe. It also plays an important role in the emotional function or emotional experience, that we can see the evidence that if there is any kind of a damage to this forebrain, right, or an insult to the forebrain trauma, then the people can end up with the various emotional experiences like getting anger, fear, right, being very euphorious, depression, rage, irritability, as well as apathy. So these are the emotional disturbances that we can see when the frontal lobe is damaged. So frontal lobe also plays an important role in the regulation of the emotions. Next one is the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is concerned with the perceptual function, mainly related to the sensory organs. So it has got the functions like touch, perceiving the various feelings such as touch, pain, taste, and the body position. Even it has got the function of language interpretation, which is mainly seen in the left hemisphere, right? So that is the function of the parietal lobe. Moving on to the third one, which is the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe, if you take the anterior upper part of the temporal lobe, is concerned with the auditory function, and the lower part of the temporal lobe is mainly concerned with the short-term memory. The impulses carried by the olfactory nerve end in this particular region of the brain. So it plays an important role in the expression of the emotions, especially in relation to the limbic system, and it has got an important function in the regulation of the emotions. The left temporal lobe along with the left parietal lobe together functions for the interpretation of the language. So that is about the temporal lobe. Next one is the occipital lobe. Yes, occipital lobe is mainly concerned with the visual perception. It is primarily concerned with the visual interpretation as well as reception of the image, right? So when an individual observes a particular thing, he will be connecting this to the occipital lobe of the brain, wherein there is a spatial perception of the image, and even there is a perception of the distance and the three-dimensional area of the vision. The language interpretation also happens in relation to the occipital lobe as well as the association with the visual experience. So this is about the occipital lobe of the brain. So that is about the major part of the brain, which is the cerebrum, composed of the left and the right hemisphere, which is again divided into the various four lobes of the brain. Moving on to the second part, which is the diencephalon. Diencephalon is also the part of the forebrain, which is having the structures of thalamus, hypothalamus, and the limbic system. Let us see about each of it in detail. The first one is the thalamus. Thalamus is the one which is going to integrate all the sensory inputs except the sense of smell on its way to the cortex. And it is also having an important role in the emotional experience. The next part is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is concerned with the functions of the anterior and posterior part of the pituitary gland. It is having the control over the functions of the autonomic nervous system, which is regulating the appetite and the temperature. Moving on to the third part, which is the limbic system. Limbic system is the one which is mainly concerned with the regulation and the management of the emotions in an individual. So it is otherwise called as the emotional brain. So if you take the limbic system, it is medially placed in the cortex and the subcortical structure of the brain and the fiber tracts connecting them with one another with the hypothalamus. If you take the structures of the limbic system, you can see here in the image, it has got the various structures such as the hippocampus, mammillary body, amygdala, fornix, you have got the cingulate gyrus, thalamus, hypothalamus, olfactory tract, and the septum pellucidum. So these are the various parts if you take in a limbic system which is coordinating and controlling the emotions of a person. So it is associated with the various emotions like the fear, anxiety, anger and aggression, love, joy, hope, sexuality, as well as the social behavior. So that is about the limbic system. So we have finished the first part of the brain, which is the forebrain. Moving on to the second part of the brain, which is the midbrain, otherwise called as the mesencephalon. So this mesencephalon includes the structures such as the nucleus as well as the fiber tracts, and it is extending from the pons to the hypothalamus, and it is mainly responsible for regulating or interfering with the various reflexes. So we have got the various reflexes like the visual reflexes, auditory reflexes, and the right reflexes. If you take the visual reflexes, so when a person sees that there is a sudden damage to the visual point, he just moves his eyes towards another place. So that is the reflex that we can see, which is the visual reflex. So second one is the auditory reflex. So suddenly when a person hears a sound, he just moves his ear to the particular side. So that is the auditory reflex. The third one is the writing reflex, which is keeping the body automatically in the balance as well as in the upright position. So these are the functions of the mesencephalon. Yes, the third part of the brain is the hindbrain. So it has got these structures like the pons, medulla, as well as the cerebellum. Right. So this hindbrain we have got the pons. Yeah, where is the pons located? So it is the bulbous structure which is present between the midbrain and the medulla, and it's composed of large bundles of the fibers. It forms the major connection between the cerebellum as well as the brainstem, and it's got a major function of regulation of the respiration as well as the skeletal muscle tone. So that is the function of the pons. The second part in the hindbrain is the medulla, which is having the pathway between the ascending and descending neurons or the fiber tracts. It has got the vital centers which are regulating the functions of various organs such as the heart rate, the blood pressure, the respiration, and also certain reflexes such as coughing, the sneezing, swallowing reflex, as well as the vomiting reflex. So that is the function of the medulla. So if you take the medulla, pons, as well as the midbrain, together it forms a structure which is called as the brain stem. Right. So moving on to the next part, which is the cerebellum. Right. Cerebellum is the part which is mainly concerned with the balance and the coordination. Cerebellum is separated from the brain stem by the fourth ventricle and has got its connection to the brain stem through the bundles of the fiber tract. So it is the part which is present below the occipital lobe of the brain, and the main function of the cerebellum is the control of the involuntary movements. Right. So that is about the parts of the brain in detail, where I have explained about the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. Moving on to the next structure, very important, is the neuron. So when I say the neuron, it forms the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. The neuron is having the function of generating and transmitting the electrochemical impulses in the brain and the nervous system. If you take the structure of the neuron, here you can see in the image, it has got the central part, which is the cell body, wherein there is a nucleus, and also the parts which are extending, which are the dendrites, and the long part, which is the axon. So this is the part of the neuron. Right. So we'll see about each of it and how the nerve transmission is happening at the neuron level. The dendrites are the ones which is passing the transmission of the impulses towards the cell body, and the axon is the structure which is passing the neural or the impulses towards the cell body, wherein in the cell body there is a nucleus. The cells called as the afferent or sensory neurons carry the impulses from the periphery to the central nervous system, which are interpreted by the various sensations. If you take the efferent neurons, otherwise called as motor neurons, they carry the impulses from the central nervous system to various muscles and the glands of the periphery. So this is the structure of the neuron. Moving on to the next part, which is the synapse. Synapse is nothing but it is the space between the two neurons. So we can say that it is the junction between the two neurons. The small space between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of the another neuron is called as the synaptic cleft. Neurons which are conducting or involving in the transmission of impulses towards the synapse are called as presynaptic neuron, and those impulses which are passing away from the synapse is called as the postsynaptic neuron. So we are going to see how a nerve transmission or the impulses are carried out. It is mainly carried by a chemical called as the neurotransmitters. So we will learn about the neurotransmitters. So if you take the structure of the presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron, so we have got something called as neurotransmitters. So these neurotransmitters are nothing but the chemicals which are created or synthesized by various minerals. Like example, we can say the calcium, which will help in the synthesis of these neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are the ones, we can say, the biochemicals which are stored in the small pouches, which is called as vesicles. It is present in the presynaptic neuron. Whenever there is an electrical impulse that has to be passed, the neurotransmitters from the vesicles will be released to the synapse, that is the space between the two neurons, and from the synapse this neurotransmitters will go and get binded to the receptor sites which is present in the postsynaptic neuron. So that is how you can see here in the image the neurotransmission is happening. The neurotransmitters or the chemicals which is stored in the synapse, that is the presynaptic neuron, it will be passed to the synapse, and from the synapse the neurotransmitters will get attached to the receptors or the binding sites which is present in the postsynaptic neurons. Once the neurotransmitters get attached to the receptor sites of the postsynaptic neuron, there are few neurotransmitters which are left over in the synapse which can be reuptaken by the vesicles of the presynaptic neuron. Some of the neurotransmitters will remain in the synapse. Some neurotransmitters will be uptaken by the postsynaptic receptor sites in the neuron, and some neurotransmitters will be reuptaken by the vesicle sites. And once again, when the nerve transmission impulses is activated, these vesicles again will start releasing the neurotransmitters. So this is the physiology of the normal mechanism, what is happening in the neurotransmission and the nerve impulses. The target of many of the psychotropic medication is here at the level of the neurotransmission, right? So the most of the psychotropic medications will be functioning at the level of the neurotransmission so that the emotions and the behavior of the individual will be controlled. So that is about the neurotransmission and the neurotransmitters. So there are various neurotransmitters that we can say. We have got the acetylcholine, the gamma aminobutyric acid, we have got the monoamines, which includes the dopamine, serotonin. So likewise, we have got so many neurotransmitters which is regulating the emotion and behavior of an individual. So let us see in detail about each of the neurotransmitters. The first neurotransmitter which was identified is the cholinergic acetylcholine. So it is the first neurotransmitter which is ever discovered and identified, and it is proven as the neurotransmitter. So where is this acetylcholine located? So it is located in both the autonomic nervous system as well as the central nervous system. If you take the autonomic nervous system, it is located in the sympathetic and parasympathetic components, presynaptic nerve terminals as well as the parasympathetic postsynaptic nerve terminals. If you take the central nervous system, the acetylcholine is located in the cerebral cortex, hippocampus, limbic system, and the basal ganglia. So that is the location of the acetylcholine. Now, moving on to the functions of the acetylcholine, it's mainly responsible, which is the one which is regulating the sleep-wake cycle, that is the sleep and arousal, and also it's regulating in the pain perception, modulation and coordination of the movement, and the memory acquisition and retention of the memory. So that is the function of the acetylcholine. If the acetylcholine level is having an imbalance, okay, so there is an imbalance in the acetylcholine, it will lead to certain implications which is going to result in the mental illness. So we can say the increased level of the acetylcholine will result in the depression, and decreased level of acetylcholine will result in various disorders like Huntington's chorea, Alzheimer's disease, and the Parkinson disease. So that is about the first neurotransmitter, which is the acetylcholine. The next one is the monoamine norepinephrine neurotransmitter. So where is it located? It is located in the autonomic nervous system, in the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic nerve terminals. If you take the central nervous system, it is located in the cerebral cortex, hippocampus, limbic system, thalamus, hypothalamus, as well as the cerebellum. So what are the functions of this monoamine norepinephrine? So it has got the functions of coordination of the mood, cognition, perception, the movement, which is the locomotion, cardiovascular function, as well as the sleep and arousal cycle. What are the possible implications for the mental illness? So if the level of the monoamine norepinephrine is having an imbalance, increase or decrease in the this neurotransmitter, is going to end up with the mental disorders. So decreased level of this will result in depression, and increased level of the monoamine norepinephrine is going to cause the conditions like mania, anxiety disorders, as well as the schizophrenia. The next neurotransmitter, which is same of the monoamine, is the dopamine. So where is this dopamine located? So in the autonomic nervous system, it is located in the frontal cortex, in the limbic system, the basal ganglia, hypothalamus. So where is this monoamine's dopamine located? It is located in the frontal cortex, limbic system, the basal ganglia, thalamus, the posterior part of the pituitary gland, as well as the spinal cord. What is the function of dopamine? So it is mainly concerned with the movement and coordination, regulation of the emotions, as well as the voluntary judgment and release of the prolactin, which is again an hormone. Right. So what is the possible implications of mental illness? If the level of the dopamine is altered, increased level of dopamine will result in the condition of mania as well as schizophrenia. Decrease in the dopamine level results in the Parkinson's disease as well as depression. The next monoamine neurotransmitter is the serotonin. Where is serotonin located? The location is there in the hypothalamus, the thalamus, limbic system, cerebral cortex, cerebellum, and the spinal cord. What is the function of the serotonin? Serotonin is mainly responsible in the sleep-wake cycle, that is the sleep and the arousal. It regulates the libido, the appetite, mood, aggression, the pain perception, coordination, as well as the judgment. So what is the implication of this? If the level of serotonin is decreased in the person is going to end up with depression. If the level of serotonin is increased, then the person will end up with the anxiety disorders. That is about the monoamines, which is the norepinephrine, the dopamine, as well as the serotonin. The next neurotransmitter is the gamma aminobutyric acid, which is called as GABA. Where is it located? It is located in the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, cortex, cerebellum, and the basal ganglia, as well as the spinal cord and in the retina. So this is the location of the GABA. What is the function of GABA? So it is going to interrupt the progression of the electrical impulse at the synaptic level, thereby reducing or slowing the body activity. So it slows down the activities in the person. So that is the function of GABA. So what are the implications which are related to the mental illness? If the level of GABA is decreased, the person will end up with the anxiety disorders, movement disorders such as Huntington's disease and various forms of the epilepsy. Right. So that is about the various neurotransmitters that I have told you. That is the acetylcholine. We have got the monoamines such as the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, as well as the next one, which is the GABA. Right. So you can understand that what is the importance of the neurotransmitter. So if there is an abnormal level of neurotransmitter, the person is going to end up with the mental disorder. So we are going to see what is the abnormal transmission. When does the abnormal neurotransmission happen? One is because of the deficient in the neurotransmitter, excess level of the neurotransmitter, or there is a deficit in the receptors or excess receptors. So I have told you how the nerve impulses happening, right? We have got the presynaptic neuron, the postsynaptic neuron. In the presynaptic neuron, we have got the vesicles. Inside the vesicles, there are neurotransmitters. Imagine there is deficit in the synthesis of the neurotransmitter itself. So you can imagine there will be deficiency in any of the neurotransmitter, which will result in the mental disorders. Or say for example, there are many vesicles, and because of which whenever there is an electric impulse, more of the neurotransmitters are released into the synapse. So what happens again, there will be excess level of the neurotransmitters in the synapse, which is going to contribute again to the mental disorders. For example, if you take the receptor size, normal thing is once the neurotransmitters are released to the synapse, it will go and get attached to the binding sites, which is the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. So if these postsynaptic neuron, in that, if the receptor sites are deficient, okay, so you can imagine again the neurotransmitters will not get attached, so it will be remaining in the synapse for a longer period, will lead to abnormality. Say for example, there are a lot of receptor sites, so more number of neurotransmitters will get attached. So what happens, there is a deficit in the neurotransmission. Right. So this is the overall abnormal neurotransmitter which can happen because of the deficiency or excess level of the neurotransmitters, as well as abnormalities in the receptor sites. So very, very important that the neurotransmission happens normally and the neurotransmitter levels are maintained in an appropriate way, so that the human will be able to have the control over his emotions and his behavior. And the last topic which I have is the neuroendocrine system or neuroendocrinology. So you know very well that we have got the endocrine glands which are regulating the functions of various hormones, which are releasing the various hormones, right? So one such important endocrine gland is the pituitary gland, which is located under the direction of the hypothalamus. Pituitary gland is the master gland, and it has got two major lobes, that is the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. Anterior lobe is the adenohypophysis, which is having the function of releasing the growth hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, adenocorticotropic hormones, prolactin, gonadotropic hormones, melanocyte stimulating hormones. So these are the hormones which are produced by the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. If you take the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, which is the neurohypophysis, it is going to release the antidiuretic hormone as well as the hormone called as oxytocin. So these are the hormones which are released by the pituitary gland, which is again regulating the mood and the emotion of a person. Hope you have understood the importance of the brain as well as the neurotransmission, wherein it's a basic thing that we need to understand the subject psychiatry, because many of the psychiatric disorders is because of the alteration or imbalances in the neurotransmission and some kind of a trauma or damage to the brain, right? So if you understand the normal mechanism which is happening, it will be easy to understand the subject psychiatry. Hope you all have understood the topic. Thank you.